that what you said?
Sure. Countenance.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. There we go. Listen, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, y'all know the budgets are tight and all this kind of good stuff, and I've already had a couple people make remarks about this Tennessee orange and this Auburn orange, and so anybody that gives me good Tennessee or Auburn jokes that are bad will be viewed favorably, because it had nothing to do with those two institutions. So we're going to start off today with a bill and a resolution. Is Chairman Powell here? Thank you. For the members of the committee, House Bill 127, and just to make sure, that's fine, Chairman Powell. Just to make sure, I've got that we'll be working off LC 343602.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Many of you may be familiar with this bill from last year. It was House Bill 811 last year, passed out of governmental affairs and passed the House overwhelmingly. Got bogged down at the end of the session in the Senate and never got through both houses. But what the bill does basically is it targets the proceeds of Joshua's Law, the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, the Solid Waste Trust Fund, Peace Officers Training Fund, and the Indigent Defense Fund. And these are all fees that are directed by law to go for a particular purpose. And as you all know, if the Constitution does not mandate that those funds are spent in a particular way, even though the law may demand that they be spent a particular way, the Constitution says they go into the general fund subject to appropriation by the legislature. Rather than mandating by constitutional amendment that these fees be spent on the particular purpose that was designated by the legislature, what this bill does is it says that the legislature can appropriate from general funds however much it wants to for Joshua's Law, Peace Officers Training Fund, for Indigent Defense, Solid Waste Trust Fund, and Hazardous Waste Trust Fund. But if the amount is not equal to the amount that the fee would generate, then the fee will be reduced to equal the amount of appropriations. So effectively what this does is it says spend the money for what its purpose is intended, and if you don't spend the money on that purpose, then reduce the fee to equal the amount that's expended. So if we only want to spend $5 million on recycling tires, then let's only collect $5 million. If we only want to spend $2 million on recycling tires, then let's only collect $2 million. And that's what this bill does essentially. It has a 4-year phase-in so that it doesn't have an adverse impact on the budget in 1 year. It also provides that in the event that both houses by majority vote pass a resolution, that they can suspend it for any particular fiscal year in which we may have some kind of fiscal or financial crisis. And certainly that's something that we do not want to totally tie our hands with, but we also want to put into law some kind of fiscal responsibility. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Questions from members of the committee? Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the intent of this legislation. I just have one question. I distinctly remember a few years ago that when things turned upside down in July, right after we had gotten out of session and passed the budget in March, and then the last of June, 1st of July, we got in. And I think you've covered this, but there are times to where they may be necessary to use these funds for other things in an emergency case, which is what I understood you to say can be done in the event that we come back and basically pass legislation to say it can be done. Is that correct?
That is correct.
My only issue would be, would we have to have a special session in order to come back and do that in the event that this happened when we're out of session like it happened a few years ago?
Representative Pruitt, I don't think so. I think that even what happened in prior years when we had a disaster that happened after the session was over, the governor basically directed all the departments to either freeze spending or cut back spending waiting for the legislature to come back and then dealt with it in the supplemental budget. I think if that were done under this circumstance, that then the legislature could pass by joint resolution an authorization to freeze this for 1 year, which would be that particular fiscal year. The way the legislation is done is that you can't do it and say, we're going to suspend it until further notice. It makes us go in and do it each year and step up to the plate and say, if we aren't going to follow this particular statute, we're going to have to vote on it for this particular fiscal year. But I think we could do it at the supplemental as well as in the regular appropriation.
Thank you. And if that was actually in the legislation last year,
It was not.
It was not, because I
was not.
voted against it last year, and I will vote for it this year, and we'll be glad to make a recommendation at that time.
Thank you, Chairman Pruitt. Chairman Martin.
Chairman Powell, I want these to be a friendly variety, and I'll support your measure, but I'd support you going further. Can you address how much each one of these funds is collecting now? I mean,
Yes, sir.
yeah, in just a general number. I mean,
All right. Hazard,
maybe the total for all of them.
Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, $15 million collected.
Yes, sir.
For the current fiscal year, it's $3.4 million has been appropriated.
Right.
Solid Waste Trust Fund produces about $6 million annually. In the current fiscal year appropriation, assuming that the 2014 appropriation as recommended is passed, it's $1.8 million. Peace Officer and Prosecutors Training Fund brings in approximately $25 million, approximately $16 million appropriated. Indigent Defense has sort of flip-flopped. A couple of years ago, it was bringing in somewhere in the neighborhood of 42 to 43 million, and about 40 million was appropriated. This year, it's approximately $33 million brought in and $40 million appropriated. So it is actually more than the fund is bringing in, according to the most recent information I've received. Joshua's Law brings in about 10.6 million, zero appropriated.
Can I follow up, Chairman? And again, I want these to be friendly questions to you because I appreciate the fact you've taken a leadership role in this. I can't speak to all those, but I can speak directly to Joshua's Law, and that I was here. It was a clear intent of the legislature to collect that to do the driver's training. Now, I believe I know you served with me on public safety, and you had that. I believe DES is now under your. Well, I know for a fact it is under this, but at the time it was under the public safety and it was moved over. We didn't have the ability that first year in Joshua's Law to budget all the money that was collected because it just wasn't ramped up yet. But I believe we're somewhere on the high side of collecting $50 million more than we've appropriated to Joshua Law. Is that not true?
That's probably pretty close to accurate.
So I want to spread over this. Again, I thank you, and you're probably passing something that you've run by, leadership in the Senate and perhaps the second floor. But it is my opinion. I would like to see us set each one of these up in a sinking fund, and when they have enough money to, like Joshua's Law could fund itself probably now for the next 5 to 10 to 20 years. I mean, depending on what we spend. I'd like to see us stop collecting that fee tomorrow. So, I mean, I'll support the legislation, but I think we need to go a step further. If these monies that we're budgeting need to be budgeted, we need to find them from the general fund revenue. Specifically, Joshua's Law was passed to fund that driver's program, and when that funding is complete, that should be turned off. It is just my opinion we should not be taking those dollars to fund other things. So thank you for doing it. I wish we could do it faster in Joshua's Law and stop charging that until it was needed for Joshua's Law as well as the other funds. I know, and you're familiar in your capacity as an attorney, the Public Defender's Fund, we always were criticized for not budgeting what we collected every year, and I don't necessarily think you do that because there are years you don't have the need and other years you do. This year is more. But again, I believe if we created a sinking fund for that on an annual basis, there would have been monies left over to fund that as well. So I appreciate the legislation. I wish we could do it faster in all of the areas.
Thank you, Chairman Martin. Any other questions of the author of the bill? Great. Anyone else wish to speak on the bill? We got somebody here from ACCG, I think. Please identify yourself.
Good day, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Todd Edwards with the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. I think Chairman Powell did an adequate job explaining the provisions of the bill. We fully support Representative Powell and the passage of House Bill 127. We were happy to work with him last year. We'll continue to do so, and sincerely appreciate the committee's favorable consideration.
Any questions for Mr. Edwards? Great. I just have one.
Yes, sir.
I fully support the legislation, but I understand that the heartburn. This is called local governments, school boards, and cities and counties. I just want to make sure that none of our locals collect money for something and redirect it in their local budgets.
If law requires them to spend or is dedicated in certain areas, the fees, let's say for a stormwater utility fee, we are required to spend it for its designated purpose of which it was collected.
I just remember a legal ad that ran that said X amount was going to be done for blah, 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 but the X amount of that service actually being provided versus how much was collected was more. The rest was going to go into the general fund, and I actually had that discussions that perhaps those legal ads should define everything you plan on using it for instead of just the gold and silver and that looks good.
Well, sure. I mean, there's certain differences. I mean, there are distinctions often between what is a fee and a tax. Certain fees that we're required by law, administrative fees, can only go toward administrating. SPLOST has to cover, you know, so it just depends on whether it's a fee and tax and what has been dictated by the state government we would follow.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Edwards? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else on that particular House Bill 127? Thank you, Chairman Powell. We're going to hold that committee for a while. Thank you. We're going to hear House resolution from Representative Hughley. Is Representative Hughley here? Hey.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you a compensation resolution for Mr. Lathan Ward, and we had this resolution last year, and I want to thank the committee for putting it in the budget last year. We were almost to the end of the session when the resolution was lost at 11:56 on the last night of the session. And so we are back here today. And basically, if you recall, Mr. Lathan Ward was a young man who, right out of high school, was arrested, and he was convicted of armed robbery for a crime that he did not commit. And he was a young man who had participated in ROTC, and he wanted to go to the Marines. He was arrested, and he was charged with holding up a store called Jenny and Joe's Market, and he was accused of taking about $300 from a store clerk. However, this was a crime that he did not commit. He was in prison. He was sentenced to 15 years, and after 11 years, the Georgia Court of Appeals overturned his conviction. He was given an opportunity to plead guilty at that time, but he asked for a new trial. And at the new trial, the store clerk, who at that time was a prisoner in the Department of Corrections, was brought into court, and he told the judge at that time that he had lied about identifying Mr. Ward as the person who had robbed him. So Mr. Ward now finds himself at age of about 32 years old. He has a 12-year hole in his resume because he was incarcerated at the time, and he had spent all of his young adult life fighting for his innocence. And while he was in prison, he was stabbed 6 times after an altercation with a fellow inmate, and he was bitten by a brown recluse spider. He lost his father, he lost his grandfather without an opportunity to be with the family and mourn their loss, all because he was falsely accused of a crime. And so it is incumbent upon us as a state, when our judicial system finds that we are in error, we first must acknowledge the error and try and do everything we can to assist the individual to reconstructing his life. And so that's what this resolution attempts to do. The amount is only $400,000. As you know, the federal government has set a standard of about $50,000 a year for every year a person is wrongfully incarcerated, and another $50,000 if they are on death row, for every year they're on death row. And of course, here in Georgia, we have no standard. We worked with Chairman England, and we took a look at what Mr. Ward would have earned if he had an opportunity to be that Marine that he wanted to be. And that's how we arrived at the $400,000 number. And so on his behalf and on behalf of our citizens who are looking to us to do the right thing when we are in error, and when I say we, I mean the state of Georgia. When we find that we are in error, we have an obligation, in my mind, to try and make things right. I also want you to know that the state of Georgia did not automatically expunge his record. After he was released, we have worked the last year with Mr. Word trying to get his record expunged, and after intervention from the Speaker's office, it was finally expunged. And so he is now trying to rebuild his life, and this compensation resolution simply is an attempt to help him do that. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Hughley, any questions from members of the committee? Chairman Martin.
Representative Hughley, I don't know, I do remember this from last year briefly, and I don't want to get in, I don't know the gentleman, and don't really want to, won't be in conflict with any of your facts, but in your presentation last year and this year, you say the state did wrong. And I would respectfully, without regard to supporting your resolution, I would respectfully disagree with that. Was there found prosecutorial misconduct in the case?
Well,
let me, if I finish and you can answer them all.
Okay.
I'm not trying to take away from your resolution at all. The gentleman lost his,
liberty.
11 or 12 years.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure, 11 years incarcerated. So I don't mean to say that. I just want to make the point that if there wasn't prosecutorial misconduct or judicial misconduct, there may have been mistakes made, but the gentleman that testified that he was there and now recanted his testimony may have been the person in the wrong. So I'm not trying to take away from your resolution, but I think it's important that there was some in this resolution, unnamed judge and unnamed jury and unnamed district attorney that worked through the court system, and if it was wrong, it was probably, in my mind, from what I know, it was because of the testimony. And I just want to, in the interest of protecting their integrity as well, if there wasn't systemic problems, I would just like to have that on the record, that it was the testimony, the eyewitness testimony that was recanted that changed. If I'm wrong in those facts, please correct me.
To allay your concerns, we worked with the district attorney, Julia Slater. We worked with the judge in the case, and we contacted them and talked to them about what had happened. And both agree that this is the appropriate course for us to seek the compensation resolution for Mr. Word. The case was overturned because of lack of appropriate, the attorney defending him did not defend him appropriately. And that's why the case was overturned. Initially, and then he got the retrial.
Was it overturned or was it just set aside?
It was overturned.
Okay, it was overturned, not just set aside for a retrial.
Right.
I guess maybe the same thing.
And so, and he was given an opportunity for a retrial. At that, as I said, at that juncture, they offered him a plea bargain for time served, and he refused it because he insisted that he was innocent the entire time. Regardless of how we feel about it, the fact of the matter is people acted on behalf of the state of Georgia took away a person's liberty for over 11 years at a time when you and I were going to college and starting our families and all of that. He was sitting behind bars for a crime that he did not commit. And it is entirely appropriate for the state to compensate him for having had that experience. And so, you know, if it bothers the committee to say that the state was somehow wrong, we cannot say, we can concede that and say, you know, nobody was wrong, but somehow he ended up in jail for 11 years, and we still have a responsibility as a state, because all of the actors involved here were acting on behalf of the state of Georgia, and somehow this mistake was made. And we still have a responsibility to ensure that our citizens understand and have confidence in our judicial system, that whatever happens, whatever the mistake is, if we take away your liberty, then we understand that we have a responsibility to help you rebuild your life. And that's the basis of this whole contention of bringing forth the compensation resolution.
So it was a public defender?
A public defender.
Okay. That gets to the point, because I just, from a prosecutorial side or from the judge's side, there wasn't any misconduct, and those are state people too. And I guess I just wanted to get on the record, the trial went through in an appropriate manner. If because of something the court found later, the result was improper and there was a new trial, I'm not questioning your facts.
Right.
I just, you know, for the record, wanted to make note that the prosecutor, and again, you identified them. I didn't know who it was, and certainly don't know who the judge is.
Well, DA
thought at the time they were doing the right thing. Something went amiss, and
right.
That's what you're trying to correct. I just wanted to make sure that the people, when we say the state did wrong, it wasn't wrongful prosecution. It wasn't prosecutorial misconduct.
Right.
DA
DA Slater is a fine district attorney, and because she is a fine district attorney, she has been helping us to try and get this compensation resolution done so this young man can reestablish himself and rebuild his life. So these are people from the Columbus area, and the judge and the DA, everybody are honorable people, and that's why they have not questioned anything, and they've not tried to put any roadblocks for this gentleman in trying to get his compensation resolution, and they work with us to try and help us get the expungement done. The problem was with GCIC. For some reason kept losing his information, and we went back and forth on that. But you know, those people are from Muskogee County, and of course they still represent Muskogee County, and we're very proud of the people from our area.
Thank you, Chairman Martin. Leader Abrams, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Whip Hughley, you may have answered this. It's my understanding that absent this resolution, his only other recourse is to actually sue the state, correct?
This is the only recourse that he has. Georgia does not have an automatic compensation statute. Many states do. Georgia does not. And the only thing that a person can do is appeal to us as members of the Georgia General Assembly. Many states have compensation statutes where there is a certain amount awarded for any number of years that a person spends wrongfully incarcerated. But we don't, and this is our only mechanism.
Thank you.
Representative Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Hughley. I'm no attorney, so I don't want to go very far here, but just want to kind of understand how this guy got exonerated. Did I hear you say the store clerk changed his testimony that he, during the original trial, I guess he falsely accused this gentleman of the action he did, and later he recanted it, and has Mr. The gentleman Ward, has he sought action against this store clerk that falsely accused him of the crime?
This is what happened. The store clerk at the time of the robbery told the police he didn't know who had done this. A couple of days later, police picked him up, as they do, and say, you know, tell us who did this. And he gave Mr. Ward's name as the person that he said had done it. After Mr. Ward had been in prison all these 11 years, and the case was finally overturned and he was granted a new trial, by this time that same store clerk was a resident of our correction system. And they brought him into court. And I would imagine that after, if you would allow me to imagine, that after he had spent some time in jail himself, it dawned on him that he needed to do the right thing. And that is how he changed what he had initially said. And so it's not as if this person is a private citizen and you can sue the person, because he's sitting in jail himself. He'll be there for a good little while.
Thank you, Representative Dickey. Ms. Hughley, my only question is, it seems to me, and my memory's a little foggy, so help me with this. I think the last night of session, or at the end of session last year on this resolution that was passed, that there was some discussion between the different bodies in regards to compensation of attorney's fees, and that may have what held it up to a certain extent, is that kind of disagreement that just wasn't resolved in time?
No, there were no attorney's fees involved in this at all, because Mr. Ward this action was brought.
There wasn't a disagreement last year between the Senate and the House on that?
No.
As far as you know?
What happened was when we passed it in the House, it went to the Senate. The Senate, in their wisdom, said that there was a typographical error in the resolution that they corrected, and because it was sent over under our rules, we couldn't accept it without it going back through for another vote.
And my only point was, I just, whatever reason it wasn't last year, we've got those worked out this year.
Okay.
That was, you feel good about that?
Yes.
Great. Leader Abrams.
I was simply going to echo that. I think what happened last year, it was a very small issue that gave it back, and it literally failed in the last 5 minutes of session because of some other external issues. But it was, I think, each time we voted on this bill, it was overwhelmingly supported.
And I don't disagree. I just want to make sure that we don't go through the same thing again. And if I was the author of any bill and the Senate had a hang-up, my recommendation is make sure that those hang-ups are met so we don't watch the movie again.
And none of us want to see it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. We appreciate your attention.
Thank you. Did y'all find that nothing short of riveting? Good. Let's do a little appropriating or talk about it anyway. We're going to start for members of the committee with the State Accounting Office. You'll find that, I think, on your tracking documents on page 6. And, of course, like we always do, if you'll be kind enough to tell us who you are and what you do and what we need to know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Alan Skelton, the State Accounting Officer. If it pleases the committee, I'll start from the bottom and work up, simply because we've talked about some of the items on the bottom before. If you look at the tracking sheet and you look at 11.1.5 and 11.1.4, those numbers, the reduction in personal services of 23,000.
Just hold up just here. I just want to make sure we got people still.
Yes, sir.
Page 6, I think, for members of the committee. And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So if you look at page 6, and I'm going to go from the bottom up, but if you look at items 11.1.5, the reduction of personal services of 23,000, and then 11.1.4, the elimination of contract funds for CVIG, those are the same items with the same dollar amounts that are in the amended appropriation of 13 that we spoke about 2 weeks ago. Those haven't changed and they carry forward. The item right above that is 11.1.3. That talks about an increase of billings for Teamworks Financials. It's other funds, not state funds, but that amounts to $717,000, and that's primarily for us. We have personal services too. We have people, so when fringes increase, contract clauses increase. That's just simply making up for those changes. So a normal agency has a state appropriation for fringe increases. We're just getting a similar thing for the folks that work on PeopleSoft because they're funded with other funds, not state funds. So it's the same kind of thing. And again, the top two there are just common charge state adjustments.
Chairman Martin.
Okay, other funds, not state funds, where those funds are?
They are
GTA funds?
I'm sorry?
Are those GTA funds?
No, they are actually, what happens is we have a billing model. We'll bill the agencies for the support of PeopleSoft, and they'll pay us. And their source of funds could be state, federal, or other.
Okay. So they're funds that you don't have to have appropriated, but you do internal billings for.
Yeah, exactly.
Which means they cost other departments.
In this case, no, because they were given the money for that,
And they're giving it by,
OPB in the budget.
yeah, they're given, I mean, my point is, Mr. Chairman, and I'm not questioning because
Right.
you're past, and I appreciate you followed up with me after our
Right.
last meeting, and I appreciate that. You took the time to do that. But why'd that cost go up?
Well, again, it's a function of a couple of things. Number one is one of the things we have to support is people. So if ERS costs go up, for instance, on an agency basis, they're going to go up for the people that support PeopleSoft. So just like an agency with common charge adjustments for their employees, this is just giving us a mechanism to have those common charge adjustments for the folks supporting PeopleSoft. The PeopleSoft software contract, for instance, has an automatic 3% a year escalation clause in it. So every year the cost of that software goes up 3%.
Okay.
I mean, so there's multiples like that, but there's things built into just the running of that ERP that on an annual basis those costs are going to go up. They're not costs that are discretionary, they're non-discretionary. I can't do anything to stop them, and this is just giving us the ability to build the agencies for them to be able to pay us.
Yeah, and I don't question that, Mr. Chairman, but, and if the chair were ready to move on, I can take this offline, but I just, for one, this is money we're going to pass through, maybe in some of the departments that'll come through here. It's what we see a lot of times, and I only met you a couple of times, sir, but I trust you. I mean, he was really good in getting back with just the little question I had. So I don't question your 717, but what I would like to know is, like, PeopleSoft went up 3%. I'm familiar with software. I know that's kind of a standard deal.
Right.
But how much of the 717 was that? You know, how much is of those people are, you know, is state health benefits pushing, you know, toward you? I'd like to see that breakdown to help you manage your budget that you're having to pass along.
And then that's
I'll
not a
leave it at that.
problem. That's not a problem. We could get you all
Appreciate
that.
it. Thank you very much.
Questions from members of the committee? Do we have just anybody here from Carl Vincent, by the way? I know that's been a concern with some agencies. I certainly appreciate you for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Insurance Commissioner, good to see you. Yes, sir. Busy. You've been busy lately. Better than being huge. I don't know if an insurance commissioner can get away with those kind of jokes. You're killing me.
I'm not going to say anything about your tie.
Thank you. You're a good man.
But in Athens, Georgia, that would not be accepted because they hate anything orange, whether it be Clemson, Tennessee, Auburn, Florida. Doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, please disregard any 3% we may see throughout this document.
The big orange.
Members of the committee, I point you to page 14, I believe, on your tracking documents.
Section 28.
Commissioner, what do we need to know? How can we help you?
Give me some money back.
Oh, that.
Oh, shucks. I want to point out several items that, let's go to 28.3.3. That was eliminate the Department of Labor contract for information technology services. When I don't remember the number of the bill, Senate Bill 246 or something, when they moved the safety engineering function from the Department of Labor on July 1st to the Department of Insurance, the Department of Labor has a computer system that didn't match with our computer system in the Department of Insurance. And so we had to access data from them, and they were charging us, what was it, $12,000 a month for this data that we were receiving. And so
Who was charging you?
Department of Labor was. And so we had to get that money, we just had to rob it from other programs within the department to give them that money. And now this is terminating, saying that we don't have to continue to pay them that $12,000 a month, but you're taking the money from us, which was not, there was never any money allocated to pay for these expenses. They were just expenses that we had to scrape around and find to pay for, and so it's going to hurt us. It's going to hurt us. Then we're looking at eliminate the Bureau of Labor Statistics contract. That's $140,000, and we're in full agreement with that. But the problem is that the state was given $140,000 for this, but the federal government was matching that $140,000 and giving it to the department. And so when we eliminate that cooperative program, it's going to end up costing us another $140,000 in addition to what you are taking from us. And so, you know.
Commissioner, would that mean, and I appreciate you mentioning this, would that mean that it'd be easier to take, if we had to take 140,000, if we can take it somewhere else, but leave that in place, that you would at least get the drawdown?
We don't want to really do the program. Okay. I don't think there's not anybody really in it that's, I know the Bureau of Labor Statistics has written a letter asking us, please continue the program. It's very valuable. We give them very valuable information. But yes, Chris, wouldn't you say if they took it somewhere else?
Would that? I mean, I'm just trying to figure if that helps you absorb that any.
Well, if I mean that mean that.
And
would
you got
mean,
time to think about that.
That would mean we would have to continue with the program, okay. And
yeah, that's something. Just if you want to look at the numbers, crunch them, okay. See what the services you're providing.
Okay, all right. You got that down, Chris? Yes, sir. Chris is my man.
Jeremy's ours.
Then everything else, you know, it's a governor's recommendation. Y'all pretty much went along with it. Can I touch on this fraud fund?
Please.
If y'all will give us this back, and then don't, this is not a one-time deal. We do real good work with this money. If you'll put it in there and then not take it back in the supplemental budget, then we'll never have to mention it again because it will go forward. This is money that comes from the industry, and they are willing to give us this money. This is an assessment that we assess the industry on a pro rata basis on the amount of insurance they write. They send that money in, it goes into the general fund, and then it is dispersed to us and given to us to operate our fraud unit. And so if you'll put it in there and forget about it and don't reduce it like you did last year, then we won't ever have to mention it again.
We get those requests all the time. Just put it in and forget about it.
I know. But then it'll be in the continuation budget, and we'll be able to accept. It's not state money. There's no state money there. It's all from private industry.
Thank you for letting us know that. Chairman Martin.
I wanted to go back if I could, Commissioner. How much do we spend on the Department of Labor Statistics contract? You said they didn't want us to keep doing it because we're helping them out. If we're helping them out, how come we're paying them and they're not paying us?
Well, they're paying $140,000. They're matching this money.
Okay.
Coming in.
That's what I'm getting at. To provide the service costs $280.
Right.
So if we cease doing that, and we take 140 away, and they take 140 away, you don't have to do a service that costs $280. Why are you 140 in the hole? You're just not doing the service anymore.
Well, we're not doing the service, but what we're going to have to do is lay people off. I mean, we're going to have to terminate, not lay them off, terminate them, because we have people that are dedicated to providing this data and doing everything on this contract with the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Okay.
And it just eliminates your ability to redeploy those resources to another area within the fire safety. Remember when I spoke to y'all the other day, we were talking about being 11,000 inspections behind with the elevator inspectors. There was some internal discussion. Obviously, if we, had the funds and the availability, we would certainly appreciate the opportunity to redirect those resources. And that's
well. And if I may follow, Mr. Chairman, I mean, and Commissioner, that's what I wanted to get to. You've got $280,000 you're spending on some folks and some stuff in order to provide this data. That money is being taken, but you still have the folks. And I mean, if the folks aren't doing the job, and I don't want to seem crass to people that matter, but then we don't need to pay them anymore. And I think what the commissioner is saying is, for 50 cents on the dollar, if you will, if we could find it, he could redeploy those in an efficient way. Just something for the committee to consider. So you don't want to keep the 140 to keep providing the labor statistics. You'd like us, if we couldn't take that, and there was some more, then you think you could do that. I bet the chairman would entertain that if you provide him a white paper or something and an end. Well, no, I was actually, Mr. Chairman. No,
Sounds good to me. All in favor?
Mr. Chairman, I was just saying they need to provide you a business case for what that 280 would do for it to be entertained. I was actually going the other way, putting the commissioner in the box there. So.
Well, we wouldn't have the 280 because you're taking the 140 from us.
No, I was just saying you need to provide the chairman a business case if you want to keep it, what you're going to do, because you're not going to provide the labor statistics anymore.
Thank you, Chairman. Martin, any other questions? Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate
You're
it. We'll get
certainly
together.
welcome.
We'll get together on that.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Moving right along. Department of Driver Services. And members of the committee, that would be page 12. I'm sorry, page 10. All right, go ahead, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Rob Michael. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Driver Services. I'm joined by Michelle Jordan, who is my Budget Director. Just jumping right into this thing, first line is 20.1.1. That one plus 2.1 and 3.1 total up to our ERS total adjustment statewide, which is 718 and change. 20.1.2 is Teamworks Billing. That's a statewide adjustment. RRE reduction is through all three of our programs. That totals $25,175. That was articulated through some DOAS contract renegotiations. Moving down now into the second program, license issuance, 20.2.2. That is a loss of $144,000 and change. I believe that comes through. Historically, there is a statewide adjustment in the GETS bill. Had that been 730, and then you subtract out a 10% reduction there, which all the agencies were asked to do, that 10% would be basically $874,000. Comes out to the 144. If you want me to touch on just one item of that reduction, where that would come from, I'd be glad to. Or if you want me to keep moving, I'll do that too. All right, that one biggest item there would be regarding 620 of our computers at the testing stations that we have in every center. Right now, those are full-service computers. We would be exchanging those for something called a thin client PC. It's basically a Google box. It's simply an internet connection. That's actually all that we need, because we need the test scores and the person's info just to ping off of the mainframe. These little thin boxes don't have the ability to run any kind of software program or anything like that, but we don't need that on those computers. So when you take out the cost of installing them and buying them, it comes up to $527,000. That's the biggest chunk there. The other good thing about these little thin client PCs is we don't have a maintenance contract on them. I mean, basically, if they break, you throw them in the trash and buy another one. So that's the biggest chunk of that. I'll keep moving on through the rest of it if that's acceptable. The telecommunications, that's 20.2.4. That number comes from taking 52 employees who have a desk phone and a cell phone, and the cost is $19.40. So 52 people times 12 months times 1940 gets you at $12,109. And then the converting of the DSL lines to T1, which we talked about last time, that's the $200,000 add to help us get both an SLA and make sure our information is keeping the records up to date on the mainframe. That's the gist of that without rehashing what we did the last time, but I'm, of course, glad to answer any questions or go over anything that you so desire.
Thank you. Members of the committee, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really don't know how to ask this question, so bear with me. But with the IT, we have a certain amount of information that has to be available to us within a certain amount of time. And it costs more for us to actually put things on servers that have backups to where it's immediately available if something fails. And then we got other agencies that really don't have to have that information. You know, it could be if something happened to your systems and they go down, you could wait till the next day and yeah, maybe some heartburn. But it's very expensive to carry that priority to where it has to have backup and be available at all times. Can you tell me which one of these programs you're on?
I believe we're on a program where it's mostly available if we can get it to the mainframe. I know that GTA, we've been talking to them about how far back the data could go to be stored in some other mechanism so that we wouldn't necessarily have it immediately, but we would still have it. We have a statutory requirement to maintain our driver's license, personal info on all of our customers. Now, if all of it was not immediately available, the last couple of years, I believe that would have a big impact on us operationally and moving customers out of the centers. One of the, kind of looking at the T1 lines as an example, one of the reasons we need to make that upgrade, or we're asking for the funding to make that upgrade, is so that everything gets uploaded at night, so when that customer comes back the next day or whenever it is, we can get to that data immediately, as opposed to having to tell them fill out a form again or come back, whatever reason, the system was down, you got to come back tomorrow because we can't get to what you brought us the other day and you didn't bring it with you this time. I believe it would have a front-end operational impact.
Well, I know you're in the customer service business, and maybe I'm off track here, but if somebody comes in to get their driver's license and all of a sudden the systems went down, is that catastrophic compared to what the savings would be if we didn't have to have backup and be online every minute and have to guard against that? Have you ever looked at the cost savings there, and would it be something you'd be willing to look at?
First of all, I'm willing to look at anything, but the front end answer you, catastrophic, I don't want to, maybe that word is too strong for me to use, but I do know that when sometimes the systems go down, we had it happen earlier this week, and this is not a system run by us or GTA, but when the AMVA circuit goes down, and AMVA is the umbrella organization for all the DMVs in the country, and certain things we have to use to ping off of them on a problem driver pointer system that tells us if this person was licensed in another state and had tickets there or whatever. When that goes down, the lobbies back up very, very quickly. And that's when all of us start getting the calls, and we start getting people, especially in the summer, sitting in the hot offices getting frustrated. So I don't want to sound dramatic by saying it would be catastrophic, but I definitely believe it would have a serious impact on the customer.
And I understand that. Could I just ask you to find out what that additional cost of having that as a priority, so the system always has a backup? What is that costing you additionally, if you don't mind asking that question?
No, sir, I do not mind at all. Okay. I'm more than happy to do that.
Chairman Martin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Appreciate you coming by as well. On
Yes, sir.
20.2.3, increased funds for archival storage for real ID. When we had GTA in the other day, they talked about, and I think that's what Chairman Pruitt was talking about, is they were talking about 85 cents a gigabyte per month for their storage, and that was the mid-level cost. I did a quick math here. $541,000 when laid out over $10 a year per gigabyte. I mean, where's their invoice or quote for that? I mean, what are you guys buying? I mean, it seems like you're buying, I don't know what comes after terabyte, Mr. Chairman, but 1,000 terabytes. I mean, how much storage are you buying? I'm not questioning your need for it. Sometimes I wonder if this turns into magic numbers and you ask them for storage and you're buying somebody else's storage array.
That's monthly. I can give you my monthly cost for storage if that would be answering you. I think you're saying how much
Well,
storage.
you've got an increase of $500,000.
Right.
At 85 cents per gigabyte per month, that's a bunch of little zeros and ones running around.
Well, and that number actually takes two things into consideration. The cost for the storage, which when it's broken out is 48, let's just call it 49,000 and then the cost for pinging the mainframe is the other $450.
And what is that? I mean,
Well, what happens with Real ID, we're pinging the mainframe more because we have more documents we have to scan, and right now we're even seeing.
well, I mean, not to interrupt, but pinging to me means that you're communicating with it. I mean, you're
Right.
talking about storing things on it. You're talking about using CPU time.
Yes,
you're-
sir.
Okay.
All of that.
I mean, I just, Mr. Chairman, he's just given what they're quoting him, and we'll get to GTA later. But I just think some of this is a little magical, and is he really?
Stuck it to the cob, that 450. Do you have any way to know that it really couldn't have been done for 420?
There you go. That's what I was after.
Yeah, I think so.
The $450,000 increase was based on July, August, and September. We compared the mainframe time that we incurred year over year from FY 2012 to FY 2013, 3 months into Real ID, and looked at the increase, and that's how that was calculated.
Yes, so it's prorated.
Yes.
Chairman Pruitt.
The chairman hesitated, so I'll make it quick. I'm concerned a little bit about, you base this on what you project your numbers will be and what you will need next year. That's how you come up with a budget. And I know you had a certain amount in your budget last year. But what I really want to know is, how much did you spend last year compared to what you're asking for this year?
Is that the 20 less than that? The 30 less than that?
See, the way I understand the budget works is we always, I'm sorry.
Anytime you got them talking, I always like to let them answer.
Oh, yes, Mr. Chairman. And
Whoever talks first loses generally.
you've been here longer than I have, and I respect that.
Do you have the actual cost we paid last year? With your permission, I'll bring that to you. I don't have that sitting in front of us right now.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, can I tell them why I wanted that?
Yeah, now you can.
Okay, thank you. What we do is that this budget shows us what we want over what we requested last year, not over what we spent last year. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So there's really no way for us to know what you spent last year and how we're really basing this off of your budget last year, not what you spent. So that's the reason we need to know.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
And I appreciate y'all being here. I just have a couple small questions. I know that when it came to your recommendations to the governor, you had offered up more in some of your operating expense customer service support program and your license issuance program.
Did we offer more?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. We,
And I just want to know what your thought process was on why you offered more in those particular areas, even though it wasn't taken.
well, what we really offered, quite frankly, is people, because it's really just about all we have left. That 3% would have come out to 53 positions. Our operating costs have gone down about 22% from the peak.
Okay.
And
so-
we've cut staff at headquarters and in the field, so that was the biggest chunk of it.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that quite gets me where I was going. You offered the exact same amount up, I think, on your DOS contract for a half year last time
sorry.
that you're putting in for a full year.
Yeah, go ahead.
Those figures were provided to us by Department of Administrative Services based on the calculations they came up with, and our, in conversations.
See, to me, they should almost. Would you say a minute ago prorated? That to me, that should almost match.
It was the same amount for both years based on the spend data from FY 2011. So basically, those figures were provided to us, and then they were submitted as part of our budget reduction.
Okay.
My assumption is that the figures that they gave us were annualized figures for both years.
Okay. And let's go back real quick. There's really two separate issues, but yes, you were offered up customer service and the license issuance. I hate that word. there was a difference of $93,000 that you offered up for the governor versus what was taken.
Is that on a particular line, if you don't mind me asking?
We'll dig that for you. I think the governor recognized $3,000 or $3,400 in the customer service support area. And $21,000 in the license issuance area. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, sir.
But you had offered, I think, $57,000
I understand your question.
in the customer service, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And you offered $61,000 in the license issuance, but it wasn't taken.
Yes, sir.
And so that's a difference of $93,000. And you said earlier that that was for personnel.
Yes, the contract issue, the amount that we submitted to OPB, we were provided that figure from DOAS. When about 2 months after we made our submission, they came back and said the spend data was wrong. Therefore, the cut that we gave you that you submitted was incorrect. OPB changed it to the $25,000 that you're seeing now. So that was the reason for that difference.
Okay.
My apologies, I misunderstood the question.
Well, I didn't do a real good job of wording it, and Chairman Martin didn't bail me out. Chairman Martin.
First of all, I think the commissioners they feed him these numbers, or they provide him these numbers. He's asking for the Department of Administrative Service or GTA or whatever. There seems to be a growing trend over the last few years, and Mr. Chairman, you've had this for a while, that departments, rather than being able to set their own numbers or just getting the numbers they have to spend from other places in state government that comes in past them, and the state accounting office was the first one with the 717. That troubles me some. I know I've heard you express concerns over that in our previous meetings.
He's a discombobulator switch. You go, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
It is a problem. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
State Properties Commission, page 17. Yeah. Make sure you remind me. Page 17.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. If you look at line 35.1, the Properties Commission will be reduced by $21,811. And on 35.2.1, the contribution that the Building Authority will make to the Treasury is increased by $824,123, and that will be a total of 2.84 contribution from the Building Authority.
And we thank you for the help. Any questions?
Always glad to help.
Real quick, just give me the buzz, because you did such a great job. What have you changed across the street for events and parking?
Okay.
Now we got to get to the middle.
God
of what's
knows,
important.
you know. The other day, the Speaker Pro Tem called and asked me if we would reconsider opening the plaza area down in front of the depot. In the past, we could not open it up because we couldn't get the Department of Public Safety either to send us a trooper or a Capitol Police officer down there. And so we would not open it. This year, with the opening of Post 50, the Colonel said that he could put a man down there during the evening hours when there was an event to let legislators only in. Now, I'm going to tell you, this gives me a real horror in the fact that there's 236 of you, and if all of you try to pull in there, we got a big problem. So we're hoping that, if you're going to run in there and you're going to spend 15 or 20 minutes and you come back out and hop in the car, that's great. But if you're going to be there for dinner or some long period, please pull around to 90 Central.
Right.
Let your colleagues that just need that for a short time. But
And you took this exactly where I wanted you to take it.
okay.
There's been a lot of buzz of you go there and park forever, and I don't think they understood the intent. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to go. It's really better for the drop-in.
Exactly. And we had to fence that in. The crime over there got to be a real problem over the last several years.
Well, you got senators running around.
Loose, and we have gone from about 110 to 120 incidents to about 10 incidents in a month. Now, when I say an incident, that could be somebody calling in and saying there's a suspicious person over here, or there's a package that's left unattended. So it could be, an incident could be anything that a call came in on. But it has greatly reduced the number of incidents that we've had over there. So we feel like we did the right thing by fencing that in, but we just can't open it up and not have an officer there to kind of control it.
Chairman Martin.
I'd like to ask a couple more questions before you ask to have me removed from your committee.
This is for that one.
I know. I was pausing to give you an opportunity for any of them you chose to use, sir. This is, I know, you have no state dollars here, in your budget, but you actually do because you're getting them from other people. I mean, you're collecting rents, are you not?
Yes,
that's
sir.
what pays for the operation. Do you have automatic escalators in your? I mean, I just trying to get to, because I know you remember way back in the day when we had the issues over the court building and so forth. Can you just real quickly address how you make sure we maintain the space we maintain and tell us that you're understanding?
All right. The rents are set by the Office of Planning and Budget.
Right. Right.
Okay. They take the amount that it costs us to operate. And when I say operate, I'm not talking just about the judicial building.
Right.
This building is included, and you pay no rent. The Capitol building is included. They pay no rent. The governor's mansion is included. It doesn't pay rent. So all these other things have to be included in that figure when they figure out how much the rent are. The rent right now, our standard rate is $12.63, and our premier rate is $14.43. Okay, 43 cents. Most of our stuff is standard. We have very little premium space. So with what they get, with including all their utilities and cleaning and security and all, they can't match it anywhere else. In fact, our building back here, the health building, the Building Owners and Managers Association, they keep up with how much it costs to maintain and operate buildings, and we measure ourselves against them. And so we always look real favorable, even with what we're doing with the free rents. We still come out that way. But this building back here was recognized as the Georgia Building of the Year, and it won the Southeastern Region of the Year building, and we finished, what, third nationally, was it? So we feel real good about what we do for our rental dollars.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving right along, Governor's Office. And we'll start with OPB. Pages 11 through 13.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Yvonne Turner. I'm the Director of Administration. Ms. McCartney is not feeling well this afternoon,
I'm
so
sorry.
she sends her regrets. I will be talking about the budget for the Governor's Emergency Fund, the Governor's Office, and the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. The first item is item 26.1.1. That's where we're reducing the Governor's Emergency Fund by 2 point. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Should I start all over?
What number were you at?
26.1.1.
No, you don't have to start over.
Okay. The first item is we're reducing the Governor's Emergency Fund by $2.8 million. That's based off of projections of what we expect to pay for the unemployment interest on the trust fund loan that we have outstanding. The principal balance is going down. In addition, we have favorable interest rates, so the projections would be that we wouldn't need as much to pay in September. Items 26.2.1 and 26.2.2 for the Governor's Office, those are just the statewide adjustments. Item 26.2.3, the Governor's Office is going to be reducing the operating expenses by $179,000. Basically, those savings are going to be realized through attritions and just some efficiencies in operating costs. For the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, the first three items are, here again, statewide adjustments. Item 26.3.4 is reducing the contract that we have for with Department of Natural Resources that provides operating funds for the the Council for Georgia American Indian Concerns. Currently, that contract is about $27,500. We're reducing it down to $15,000, realizing a savings of $12,500. And the last item is reducing funds for operating expenses within OPB. We're going to realize those savings through attrition. We're freezing 2 positions, a policy analyst position in our education division, as well as a grants management position. And we're going to reduce also some contract funds for some budget support services.
Any questions? The Governor's office is taking the 3% as well.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Just wanted to make sure everybody understood that for the record. Thank you, and I'm sorry you had to wait.
Okay.
Office of Child Advocate, we got anybody here? And you'll find that on the same page, I think. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Ryan Sanford, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of the Child Advocate. To my right, I also have Ken Perrin, who works in financials, and he's an Assistant Child Advocate in our office. And we, along with our Director, Ms. Tanya Boga, have reviewed the proposed FY14 budget, and we're ready to perform and make the necessary adjustments. And I'd like to start from the bottom and go up. With item 26.4.6, reducing the funds for operating expenses, we are able to accomplish this by making some adjustments to the services that we're getting. We had some contracts with some other service providers which we have renegotiated, and some others that just needed to be canceled flat out. So we were able to realize some savings in that. Also including in that figure is expenses that we were needing for traveling for the various trainings that we provide to child welfare professionals across the state. That's no longer going to be paid for from state funds. We have a federal grant that all that money is going to be coming from now on. So those are some of the kinds of things that we're doing to reduce the expenses in that area. For item 26.4.5, reducing funds for computer charges, we're going away from some more expensive software that we were using in our office. We found an alternative that will be able to meet our needs, so we're able to comfortably reduce our costs in this area as well.
How do you accidentally find those?
Say that again, sir?
Do you just wake up and go, you know what, I think we save some software?
Oh, we're always trying to work as efficiently as possible and save money, so we were able to find a reasonable alternative, sir. Okay. And reducing funds for contractual services, item 26.4.4. Now, the large amount, that figure is coming from in order to put on the trainings, we were using state funds to go ahead and book venues, and other costs associated with putting on an event were coming out of state funds. That's now coming solely out of a federal grant that we were able to get.
How many events do you put on?
For this upcoming year, our office will have, off the top of my head, anywhere between 5 and 6 trainings confirmed as of right now.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Okay. And the last item is 26.4.3, reducing funds for personal services, and we were able to do that and absorb that and still fulfill our mission, sir.
Questions from members of the committee? Thank you. Appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Governor's Office of Workforce Development. Anybody here? All right. How about Georgia Emergency Management? Anybody here from want to tell us how it's going? How are y'all doing today?
Good, Mr. Chairman.
Next page for members of the committee, I think. 26.6. How are you?
Doing great, a little soggy.
Boy, aren't we all?
Mr. Chairman, my name's Charlie English. I'm with Georgia Emergency Management Agency and Office of Homeland Security, and I'm joined by our Budget Director, Seporia McMillan. If I could, if it please the committee, call your attention to 3 items, 26.6.3 and .4 and .5. The other 2, 1 and 2, are the statewide adjustments. So these 3 items represent a 3% state funds cut to our agency, and we'd be very appreciative if you could allow us to take them in this manner, and that's to reduce the contract we have with the Civil Air Patrol by $16,163. We were able to eliminate some telephone lines in our State Operations Center, and that's $1,851. And then we have 1 position that we would eliminate in the agency for $45,227. With that, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Is that just a natural retirement or anything?
Yes, sir. It was a retirement, and we just don't see filling a position at that level currently.
Questions from members of the committee? Thank you. Sorry to keep
Thank
you
you.
waiting. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
Keep in our prayers all the time.
Department of Audits. Is that where I'm going? That was all I got left, I think. For members of the committee, I believe that's page 5. Give us just a second. How are you?
I'm very fine, thank you.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. First of all, I want to thank you for your overwhelming support on Friday. Thank you very much for your vote of confidence during the election and confirmation. So thank you.
The place was just mesmerized. It was the buzz of the entire chamber. We were high-fiving in the back going, "Go, Greg. Go, Greg."
So thank you. Made my day. I think what we'll do is we'll just talk from the tracking sheet. So we're looking at, I think, page 1, section 4. So just if we go down to the bottom of the page, you see it looks like an agency net add of $626,000. That really reflects the statewide adjustments for the retirement system. That does not reflect the 3% reduction. As you know, we submitted 0 cuts to OPB as normal practice. As we discussed in the amended 13 discussion, a 3% reduction to our budget is about $909,000, $910,000. For amended fiscal year 14, to take those cuts, we would take all those cuts in personal services. Those reductions would all be reflected in line item 4.1 in the audit and assurance services group. That's where our audit staff, that's where their expenses reside. And that equates to about 14 full-time equivalents in terms of personnel.
How many did you say?
14 full-time equivalents. We had to eliminate all those positions at the beginning of the year and hold fast on all the other ones. And our current staffing level is we're at 200 and I guess at the beginning of the year our budget was 284. We're currently at 270. So we're reflecting the 14, if you will, the FTEs currently to meet the amended adjustment. So we've taken all of our cuts, if you will, in the operating expenses area over the years. We participate. The department participates in the shared services payroll center, and we also outsourced our accounts payable processing to the state accounting office as well, and reduced FTEs in prior years.
Any questions from members of the committee? I've got one. Let's just talk about efficiency a little bit. I don't necessarily expect you to have these numbers off the top of your head, but y'all do a tremendous amount of work, and we're so appreciative of it, in doing audits for school boards. It's my understanding you send them a hard paper copy.
I'm going to say tentatively yes. I'll have to confirm that.
Okay. Here's what we were thinking. This could be just a little legislative housekeeping kind of thing that may save you some money, and I don't know. I'd like to know, don't have to have it right away, but I'd like to know how much you spend, what your process is in regards to sending out mailing hard copies, and to how many people and who gets one, and how often you do that.
Sure.
And you know where I'm going with that is, could that be done electronically and save you some money in it? Just an efficiency question that as we move
I will
forward
have
in
to
the
check and see whether a hard copy is required by the school boards.
Well,
I think all of our reports are posted online, and we email blast those out.
And that's why legislatively we may be able to potentially do a little housekeeping.
Mr. Chairman, we've continuously continued to reduce the number of hard copies that we send out. For example, in past years, we used to send out about 100 performance audits. We're down to about 20 to 30 performance audits that we send out. So we are continuously looking at ways to reduce the number. In some cases, there are school board members who are not able to receive an emailed copy of the report, and so we do have to continue to send some out. We can, however, get you some information on exactly how many copies, hard copies we're sending out, and we'll get that information to you.
Let me ask the obvious question. Supposing for the moment that there was something, I don't even know, for our office, the Board of Education, whatever the case may be, that we said you were required to send one electronic audit to the budget director or finance director of said school system, who then must or shall submit paper copies to those that or must offer or shall offer. Would that help us?
Yes, sir, that would.
Let's talk about that. And
Okay.
again, we may be trying to squeeze juice out of something that there's none left. I don't know, but let's have that discussion.
Go ahead and take a look.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
Banks and finance, or banking and finance, page 9. I think this is our last one of them, all right?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Rob Braswell, the Commissioner. With me is Tracy Whitesides, our Deputy Commissioner for Administration. And if it's okay with the committee, we'll work off the tracking sheet, Section 14. And it's the same as our amended year, and so it may be familiar to you, but there's 3 areas, I guess, that I would like to mention. The reductions that we have offered up and have been accepted by the Governor's Office are personnel related, personal services related. They're on 14.3.6. You see, that's our supervisory division. That's the division that looks at banks, credit unions, and holding companies. It eliminates 3 positions that we currently have vacant. One says 1 filled position, but now that position is now vacant. So it's to eliminate 3 positions that are currently vacant and 1 part-time labor position. And then in our non-depository financial institution division, you go to 14.4.5 and then 0.6 right below it, eliminate funds for part-time labor and temporary labor. Those are 2 positions where we have hired or contracted with individuals on an as-needed basis during our licensing procedure. We license the mortgage brokers, mortgage lenders, mortgage loan originators, money service business areas. That's about 8,000 licenses in all. And so when those are due each year, we have hired part-time labor to assist us in the processing of that. And only other 2 things, if I may, Mr. Chairman, regarding that I mentioned last time, but I want to bring before the committee too, is in 14, well, it's in several areas, the reduction in telecommunications expenses. I believe I mentioned last time we got that information from GTA where it shows a slight reduction, but again, at the time when I came before the committee for the amended year, we'd been told by GTA that the cost would actually go up $1,200 a month to our agency.
I remember that. Show me that on line item.
One item will be like 14.2.3. There's a little bit in each division.
Right. Okay.
But that's
okay.
one.
And the total would add up to be the 1,200.
Right, exactly.
Right.
$1,200 a month. We have followed back up with GTA again regarding that, and we have been now given the number $854 a month. So the good news is not costing us as much as we have been told, but that's still an increase as opposed to a decrease. And then the only other thing I'd like to bring before the committee is on 14.3.4, where it says reduce funds for travel. And the committee may remember, again, that was savings that was estimated by the Governor's Office based on the reduction in the number of examiners that we have on staff. But as I mentioned to the committee last time, we still have to spend probably the same amount of man hours in those institutions. So we don't anticipate our travel costs going down. It'll just be more travel per individual.
Robert, let me ask you something. You know, we're starting to hear that we know how that is, a little pickup in the housing market. If you would, because we've got a little time, if we see something, how does that affect what you do?
If you see an uptick in the housing
Yes.
market, it would increase the strength of our banks, which they are improving. You're exactly right. It's a slow workout process. We still have over 50% of our banks are considered in a troubled status, problem status. And so the good news would be we would not have to necessarily go on site quite as often if they came out of a problem status.
Okay.
You know, we can, right now, we are doing most of the examinations jointly with the FDIC, and we're both going in on a much more frequent basis than we would otherwise. On the converse side of that, as the housing market picks up on our non-depository financial institution side, we get more licensees, more individuals wanting to get back into the business and be a mortgage broker, mortgage lender, mortgage originator.
I don't even know how to ask this question. So does that mean the better we do, the more personnel you need? Or is it a break-even kind of proposition?
Well, as the mortgage size grows, the more we need individuals there. With the reduction of the number of banks that we've had through mergers, through failures over the last 5 years, we have downsized our examination staff through budget cuts in recent years. I believe at the high water mark we had probably over 80 bank examiners, bank and credit union examiners. We currently today have 57. So we have tried to kind of right size as the number of institutions go down. We still have a lot of institutions. We have 186 banks in the state of Georgia. We have 54 credit unions. And then we have the third most assets under our supervision of any banking department in the nation.
How many total employees do you have?
Today we have 97.
And 57 are bank examiners.
That's correct. That includes their direct supervisors who are now must go out into the field quite often as well.
Any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Members of the committee, I think that I appreciate it. Kind of an unusual today. We've had a bill and a resolution we had to look at that kept some of our friends waiting a little bit longer than what we would like. The schedule is next week, still working on whether Tuesday or Wednesday, but next week we're going to be giving you notices where we're going to hit some of the larger agencies and hopefully start rolling up our sleeves and seeing what we want to do. But be ready for a memo in regards next week. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.